Have you lost the connection with your higher self? Are you noticing the dis-ease of the outside world? It's time to reconnect with nature and each other and raise our consciousness, vibration, and frequency. Together we can create a world of peace and abundance. It's Spiritual Revolution Radio with your host, Dr. Will Miller.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show today. I have an empty seat across from me. My guest, I think, is running a little bit late. I talked to them earlier. They said they were going to be here. So in the meantime, great news. You get to listen to me. So I'm going to be talking about kind of living soul to soul, and that's what our guest is an expert in and works in extensively. So I'm excited to see her here as soon as she gets here. Melody Ross is her name. And then, but as you all know, at Life by Design, Healthy Living, that's a lot of what we do too. Because so many people nowadays get stuck in the physical. And rightfully so. We are kind of conditioned, really. I was going to say brainwashed, but really conditioned to think that we are just a physical being, which I've mentioned many times on this show. We are definitely not just physical beings. We are spiritual beings living a physical experience. And really, we're here for experiences. And I say that, and I sometimes wonder what people hear. Because it's easy to take that and say, well, I'm just here to have these experiences in this body. But I want to explain something before we get started with the rest of the show and the guest that's coming, Melody. But I want to just talk a little bit about the fact that everybody thinks that when we pass from here, and I'm going to explain this in a little more detail, hopefully in a way that you can all understand it. But when we pass from here, we leave this third density experience, go up to a fifth density experience as a spirit or in some spiritual form or as an energy. And then those that believe in reincarnation, and reincarnation is just continuing to grow as a spiritual self and in a new body, whether that be here, somewhere else, or whatever you happen to believe. But as you reincarnate, you kind of come back to 3D existence. But that's not how it works. I want you to picture this for just a second. We never leave that fifth density version of ourselves, or sixth density, whatever it happens to be, depending on where we're at on our path as in our soul lives. You never leave that. We're experiencing this from there. So really, we're always there. There is no not there. We're having these experiences, and that's what we have this body for, is this experience, if you will, here in this space, in this three-dimensional or third density body from there. So we're not going back. What we're doing is we're learning from our experiences here as a soul person, for lack of a better word, and then moving on from that experience to another soul person with a different frequency. You see, all of us here on this planet, in this third dimensional state, or third density state, and all of us wherever we're at in the fifth density or sixth density, where we're at there, we're running at a different frequency. And I really like to think of us as dealing with each other in soul groups. We're all connected. We know we're all connected, but we are all separate as well. And we deal with each other in soul groups, all of which are kind of at that same level or that same vibration or frequency as we are, both as souls and, in this case, physical beings here on this earth. So we're all dealing with that from that place. So when you pass this existence, or when you leave this existence, you're really just jumping out of that physical body and into that space, or you're really back into your consciousness of that state. Sounds like my guest is showing up here. So I want to kind of, hopefully you understand what that means and what I'm trying to explain. And you're going to continue with your soul group growing, whether it happens to be in a third dimensional, fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional, sixth dimensional world, whatever it happens to be, as your frequency as a group or as a whole, because all of us are connected, grows. So we're here on this planet at this time, living these experiences for a reason, because we're all growing at the same frequency, and some of us will grow, some of us won't, some will do things over, some will move on to something a little different, and that's how the process will grow, and that's what will happen. So hopefully I explain that in a way you can understand. If not, just, direct message me on my Facebook page, or get a hold of me on my website at lifebydesign.institute, and we can talk about it for sure. And I'll help you to understand. Something else I want to announce before my guest steps in here and goes to work with me is I just want to mention that starting in February, I'll be going back to doing my classes, my energy classes, once a month, both live and online. So they'll be done live, and you can join in online if you would like as part of that process, and participate in those classes and ask questions either online or in person. So I just want to get that out there real quick before we get all started here. And then the next thing I just want to mention before we get started, here she's coming in. You see me waving. Here she is. Hello, Melody. So good to see you. I'm going to put you, just bear with me, everyone listening. I'm going to put you straight across from me. We're already on the air. And headphones right there for you. And we'll get you started. And I'm just going to finish the point I was on, and then kind of start bringing you into the conversation. So, if you want to get a hold of me for those particular courses, definitely get a hold of me on my website at lifebydesign.institute, and just put a message in, and I'll get back to you and get you the dates and times for the courses. Melody, I'm going to have you get close to that mic when you talk so everybody can hear you. Welcome to the show. It's Melody Ross, everyone.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here.
So let me just tell you a little bit about what I know about Melody, which isn't a lot, but I've met her a few times, so I do know a little bit. She's an amazing mom. She is an artist. She is a teacher, a coach and a teacher, and really deals with the subject we're talking about today, which is living soul to soul and finding your soul self, which is your true self, which before you walked in, we kind of got started the subject a little bit, because that's what I do, as you know.
Yes.
I'm big into helping people find their divine nature, right? Which is the same thing. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I am happy to have you here too. So if you don't mind, just tell us your story a little bit. Tell us, I can't take a long time because we don't have that long of a show, but, kind of give us the rundown of how you got to where you're at, and a quick story of what you're doing.
Well, I've been a serial entrepreneur since my 20s, and I always wanted to be an artist, but through some circumstances in my life, I ended up having a global company before I was 30, and then my husband had a traumatic brain injury, and I realized how much I needed to figure out who I am to be able to survive, some trauma, and I realized how much the creativity and the art and the soul searching was helping me to manage. You know, I had 5 children when he was out for about 5 years, and we had a ranch and we had a business and everything, and I started utilizing journaling and art and started finding, like a direct connection to the divine through doing that. And so then I started sharing some of those processes with people who are also going through difficult things. And then I saw how effective it was for them. And then I turned that into my career since, it's been close to 15 years since I started gathering people together for creative self-inquiry, basically what it is. Finding your own answers by connecting to who you actually are without any kind of middleman or middle anything, just having a direct connection through creativity. Because I really believe creativity is our birthright, and we come from a creator, and when we find ourselves able to get deeply creative, we can connect to everything, just like what you said, our soul self, our real self, our divine self, because we're connecting to the divine. We're being like the divine when we're creating. So that's what I do. So now I have retreats. I have 60 courses, 20 books, and now I certify people to teach my curriculum so that they can go share this magical way of healing and discovery,
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do.
Awesome. So I know you do a lot of these retreats and you're training people and those kind of things, but kind of tell people how you bring the creative part into it, because I think that's a little unique, and it's kind of a cool thing that you do. And you're all about, well, you said it, creativity.
Yeah, creativity.
Right? Yeah.
The thing that I've discovered is that sometime in our childhood, usually, people stop thinking that they are creative. They think that you have to be an artist to be creative. And so the first thing I have to do is create an atmosphere of safety and union and almost childlikeness for people to even be able to be creative. And so much of what I do is just creating a space where people can figure things out for themselves, and that they can. The biggest thing, that the most effective way to do that is to drop every label. So we actually have some community rules and guidelines where we don't talk about anything that would put a label on you. We don't talk about religion, politics, career, sexuality, race, anything. You walk in and you walk in, whenever you work with me, you walk in with an agreement that you're only going to come in as a soul having a human experience. And we decide together that during this time when we're together, we aren't going to define ourselves in any way but that. And that creates so much safety, because in our culture, it's like everybody's carrying around this sheet of qualifiers. Like, are we allowed to be friends? Do we vote the same? Do we believe the same? Do we, and I watched this thing happen. And so after I had a few retreats, I just was like, let's just eliminate all of that and see what happens. And I saw absolute miracles happen, not only for people individually because they felt safe where they knew they weren't going to be judged, but also they found that when you lead with who you actually are and you see a person as they actually are, they found friendships and not even friendships, like just union with each other before they even knew details about each other that would normally keep them divided. So, that sounds funny that's the way that I get people to be creative, but it really is what it requires. It requires such a level of safety for you to allow yourself to think that you're allowed to create something that's never been created, that didn't exist before you created it. It's like, I don't know what happens to us where we think we're not allowed to do that unless we have letters behind our name or we're an artist or whatever. We think we have to create things exactly the way everyone else has created them. And I found that I heal, and the people that I work with heal, when they give themselves the permission to create, like anything, create a new life, that out of things that have never been put together before, or just create a piece of art, or just create, when they get into that energy of creation, they find out who they actually are. It's the most beautiful thing.
It is.
Yeah.
And we have all been, since we've been born, and I've talked about this many times on the show, that we've been conditioned to believe that we're this physical existence we see in the mirror, that the titles are important, that what you learn is important, that you must go to school, you must finish college, you must get a job, you must, or
you
whatever. You
must weigh this much, you must be this age, if you're, and then you're going downhill after that. Like it's so limiting.
And hang out with these type of people and do these kinds of things and whatever it is, and that's how the rest of society is going to judge you. And
Yeah.
we go around worried about what people think
Yep.
all the time.
Yep.
And
And we're also assuming what people think.
well, yes.
Because we don't even know what they're thinking. know?
And that's that is the fact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We really don't.
No, we don't.
We only know what we believe that they're thinking.
Yes, exactly.
And which
we
becomes
design
our
our
belief.
life, and then we design our life around it.
Yeah.
And even if we knew what they thought, does it really matter? So not only does it not matter, but we also probably project beliefs things we think they're thinking on them and on us, and then we design a whole life around something that might not even be true, and also doesn't really matter, even if it was true. It's
Right.
really crazy what we do as humans.
Well, and it is crazy because we take that as we take the assumptions as our belief. And if we did hear the truth about what they really thought, which probably isn't the truth because it's based on their story anyway, so
Yeah.
we're not going to hear it the way that they really mean it.
Yeah,
See,
and on
now
our
we're
story,
really getting crazy.
Yeah, well, it's on their experiences and our
experience,
experiences
right.
and our environment and how we were raised and the time in history. Like there's so many factors that it's just ridiculous to even measure that into our daily
Right.
decisions.
And I love having this conversation with you because the more we talk about it, the more people I think hear, well, this is crazy, everything they're saying. Well, it is crazy.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's
the-
and it's painful, and
Right.
it's limiting. It's not without consequences. Like it's not just this static thing. Like you can find yourself. I think a lot of us find ourselves after we're done raising our children in middle age, going, I think I just lived a whole life based on what people think of me, and that's a really tragic discovery sometimes.
Based on what I believe people think.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
Right.
that. Yeah, but it's not tragic. Like I'm 51, and I thought that was going to be the most horrible thing to get older, and I love it so much. But I feel like I just got through this school, and now I get to start my life. And so that's what I try to share with people is don't feel bad over what you thought was true and now is maybe isn't true. Just be like, oh my gosh, now I get to do something different. I get to be new.
Well, and really, isn't that what life is for?
Yes, every day. I think that's why the sun goes down and comes back up, or that's how it appears to us. We're spinning or whatever. I think that even if that isn't the purpose, it's an absolute opportunity every day. To close your eyes, go to sleep, and wake up and go, who do I want to be today? What do I want to learn today? What do I want to experience today? What do I want to create today?
And I think it's sad that we have been conditioned to believe that isn't how it's supposed to be. I mean, we are supposed to live as many experiences and as much of life as is possible
I think so too.
in this three-dimensional body, right?
Yep.
Or using
Yeah.
really this
Yeah.
three-dimensional body.
Or partnering with it,
Yeah.
partnering with it. It wants to help us experience. We curse it as it ages and as it puts on weight, takes off weight, whatever. But it really, like, I've found that when I get in my body and I partner with it, it wants to help me experience more things more richly, through all these senses. It's extraordinary to come to a place where you're not hating your body all the time, where you're appreciating your body and even being in your body. I think a lot of us have learned, especially a lot of the creative people I know, we've learned ways to dissociate from our body. Like we're up here and our body's over
Right.
here. When you do the work to like get in your body and be embodied, it's a little bit scary at first, but then it's just this rich experience. You're not thinking. I think when you focus on what you think other people are thinking, that's a dissociative experience. You're not in your own body going, well, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? What am I experiencing? And when you learn that you've been doing that and then you start doing it in your own place, this absolutely sacred, beautiful thing happens. That's the grieving process I was talking about, where you're like, oh my gosh, I could have been living like this for 50 years and I just started living like this. And I think that's the thing I want to share the most with my students and I have an army of certified instructors that work with me. That's the thing I want to share the most is like, get in your body, in your aging, sagging body and love your life and appreciate your body and experience everything, taste everything, hear everything, notice everything, feel everything, and just appreciate it, appreciate it, and don't hate on it, all the time.
Right. Well, and it's because people are disconnected.
Yeah.
Right. They don't see that once they are connected to their higher self
Yeah.
or soul, their soul, however
Yep.
you want to interpret that.
Yeah, there's just
right?
so many words, right? I don't even
There's-
think there's a right word for it. Like
I'm
we
not
try
sure
to
there is.
explain it, and it's so much bigger. But yeah, once you connect to that,
Yeah, you just that's when you can really and people don't like this word, but if they understood the real definition, it'd be okay. But you become hedonistic,
Yeah.
and all that means is you really do taste, you really
Yeah.
do feel, and you feel it for real instead
Yes.
of how you've been told to believe it should be.
yeah,
Right.
or feeling guilty,
Right.
during and after. Yeah, I and also just I think we eat mindlessly. I think we are in relationships mindlessly. And I think that's just it's part of what we have to learn. But when you're doing it mindfully, there's all these. I was thinking about this on the way here. All of the things that get lost in translation. Like if you your show's based on spirituality, and I was thinking like there's so many people that are scared of that word spirituality. Like if they're of a certain religion or whatever. And I was just thinking like it's because you sit down and you ask 10 people in a room what spirituality means, and they all have probably a really different definition of that. To me, it just means your highest self, your God self, your best self. Like connecting with your best, that self you were before you had all of these crazy human experiences. That self that you were when you were a tiny little baby. That self that you're going to be after you die. That's what I believe spirituality is, and I think like there's so many words that divide us too, and I wish we could all just sit down and say, well, what do you mean when you say love? What do you mean when you say, and because I've done that. I've been married for 32 years, and we have to do this a lot. We have to sit down and go, what did you just mean when you said that? Like I assumed you meant this, and he didn't mean that at all, and so I
Right.
think even that, like if we would just have the courage to just sit with each other and find out.
Well,
Find
have a
out more about
conversation.
have
Yeah.
have a real and listen
Yeah.
and not assume that this is someone I could never be friends with or I could never
Not
agree
defend
with.
the assumption.
Yes.
Because that's what happens when we sit in those conversations sometimes is I've made an assumption based on what you say. So
Yeah.
I say, well, did you mean this? Or can you explain what you mean? And all of a sudden you're defending the fact that I made the assumption, right?
Yep.
And that's
Exactly.
what creates is the argument rather than both of you just stopping and listening to find out what each other truly means. Because especially in a relationship with you and your husband,
Yeah.
for instance, you're coming from a place of love
Yep.
anyway. So come from that place of love.
Yes.
But we get so stuck.
We do.
we really do in this little belief or that's going on inside of us, which is an illusion, by the way. It's not even real.
Yeah, it's not. Well, it can't. Yeah, we can't ever have any enough of the facts for it to be real. Yeah, it's an illusion. But I think one of the things our human family struggles with is somehow we think that for us to be right, that other people have to be wrong.
Right.
And lots of people can be right about things that are totally different because we're all standing in a different place of viewing, and we're seeing different things and we're experiencing different things. And that's what I've found from, sitting with women and men for a week at a time with absolutely no technology, they have to be very present. I'm listening to their stories that things that I used to assume were, wrong or whatever that I thought I was right about. I listen to them and I'm like, wow, from where they're standing, that is the truth. And from where I'm standing, this is my truth. And why can't we all just why can't we respect that about each other? Like, why do other people have to be wrong for us to be right? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I do know what you mean. And I
Yeah.
agree wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
I think a lot of that just comes from the conditioning from the world around
Yep,
us,
I
right?
do
It's
too.
the social conditioning.
Yeah.
So when we get stuck in that too, believing that's
Yep,
truth,
yep.
and it's not.
Yeah.
So, and we do have these amazing souls. We have about a minute before a break, so
Okay.
kind of keep that in mind, and then we'll be back to continue talking. But as people really start to awaken to the fact that we've been trained since birth to let go of that soul side of us,
Yeah.
that spirit side of us. We have this body, mind, spirit, but we've kind of left the spirit out for so long that we are going through a spiritual revolution,
Yep.
which is what this show is all about. Is okay, it's really time to bring that back, and I love what you do. And as we come back from the break, we're gonna. I've only hit one question on all
Okay.
my questions, so we're gonna come back from the break and
Okay.
and talk about that some more. Before you came on, it's very interesting because I was just talking about the fact that we look at ourselves in this space and we're going to die and we're going to come back to this space maybe again in reincarnation. And I was explaining that really we're always there.
We're never
left.
destroyed. Yeah, we can't be.
We'll be right
All right,
back.
there we go. We'll be right back,
Okay.
everyone.
Spiritual
Bye.
Revolution Radio with Dr. Will Miller on Radio St. George 100.3 FM.
This is Henry Fogel inviting you to join me on Collector's Corner, a program heard on this radio station every week. The next edition of Collector's Corner will be the first of three featuring the three symphonies by Wilhelm Furtwängler. On this week's program, including the second movement of his symphonic concerto for piano and orchestra and a piano trio. Music of Wilhelm Furtwängler on Collector's Corner. I'm Henry Fogel. Join me for Collector's Corner, Monday mornings at 11 on Radio St. George 100.3 FM.
Hey, it's me, Richie T here, host of The Cultural Hall. The Cultural Hall is an hour-long program about all things Mormon. Visit us online at theculturalhall.com, and in the meantime, we'll be saving a seat for you on the back row of The Cultural Hall.
Give this line if they live righteously.
The Cultural Hall with Richie T. Sundays at 2 on Radio St. George 100.3 FM.
Listen to the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, Fridays at 11 on Radio St. George 100.3 FM.
Welcome back to Spiritual Revolution Radio on Radio St. George 100.3 FM. And now your host.
Hello, everyone. It's Will Miller, and we're back. Melody and I are back, and we're going to be talking some more about really living soul to soul, right? And which is what it's all about. I was talking to my oldest son the other day. He's 23, and he was talking to me about stuff I didn't even learn until my 40s. Or really just kind of, I did life how I was supposed to. You go to school, you get a job, you get a family, you pay attention to that, you grow your business, you do all those things. And it wasn't really till my 40s that I kind of started really realizing that I'd kind of taken this path that really wasn't serving me at all. And he's talking about these things, and I was like, I do think this younger generation, we complain about millennials sometimes. I own a restaurant business. We complain about these millennials that don't want to work, but I think they might have it.
I love the millennials. Again, like if you sit down and ask them questions and you open your mind, their perspectives about things are really, really different and interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I really think they are going to. It takes chaos in order for change to really happen.
I'm a specialist in chaos.
So I think that they are going to bring that about for us, and they're going to be that catalyst to really bring about change in the world, which we've needed, obviously, for a while now. You see this spiritual movement, for lack of a better word, kind of happening more and more now as people wake up to the fact that what we've been doing is not working.
Nope.
Yeah,
it's working for some people, but it doesn't work unless it's working for everybody,
Yeah. And the vast majority, it really hasn't been working for.
A long time.
It's the small minority
yes, exactly.
that wins with this particular plan.
Yes.
And I understand them wanting to hold on to that.
Yeah.
Right? For sure. So you talk about our soul really is this beautiful thing in this beautiful place, and tell us, so everyone listening understands what you mean by that. Like, it almost sounds like they're separate in some of the ways it's explained, and I don't
From
believe
your body?
that's. I mean, I don't know that that's it.
I think we're in a physical form. Some people call it a flesh suit or whatever. I do think it's one. I think our body and our spirit make up our soul, but I also believe that because of the way that our bodies are designed with neurochemicals and memories and muscle memory and even epigenetics, we can carry our ancestral trauma and memories, and that we have the separation for me comes from was this an experience that you labeled as who you are, or from what you actually are? So like when I have my events, I ask people to say, instead of I'm an addict, I say things like I'm a beautiful soul experiencing addiction, rather than labeling yourself as something. And so the only separation for me comes from labeling yourself as something because of experiences you've had. You know, I'm a like we love our labels. A lot of us have worked really hard for our labels. You know, letters behind our names and things like that. But I've experienced losing my labels I worked really, really hard for. And that was probably the most spiritual experience I've ever had, you know, where I was a millionaire, I was businesswoman of the year, I was on TV shows and in magazines, and then I lost everything. And in what I experienced as very unfair and unjust ways. And I had to really grapple with really ridiculous questions that I was asking myself, like, do I matter if I don't have a social media following anymore? Am I worthy if nobody knows who I am or where I am? Like, I found myself asking those questions, and then I was like, this is really a sick belief I have. And so that loss of all of those labels that I worked so hard for also helped me to release labels like failure and labels that I feared having my whole life, that I could have had if I took an experience and I put that as my identity. I daily I try to do Nicole, who's been on the show several times, we were just talking about this today, about doing spiritual hygiene, where you just brush away all that. I try to do that every day. Like, what am I believing myself to be today? That's right. Just an experience that I had, because those are very, very heavy. They're heavy. They make you move through life very slowly, and they take your choices away when you define yourself as something, and when you define others as something. That's the thing, is you see somebody who looks a certain way. Like when I was growing up, I would have to walk by this park, and it was full of hippies, and my mom would say, "You stay away from those hippies," and I would just be like, "What's a hippie?" You know? And then I kind of became a hippie, you know. And so and then I would see the guys in the Armani suits and everything that the world, you know, kind of glamorizes, and those were the people that I had the worst experiences with. And so I started just really going, maybe these assumptions we make based on what we see might be wrong, and that became, just unlabeling everything became my most spiritual experience, my most connective experience, and also just taking away any kind of middleman between me and God, between me and Source, between me and the light. Like, I don't need anybody to be in the middle of me and that. Like, I'm always connected. So those have been the defining things that taught me what a soul is. And so then I try to look at people too without labels and just be like, I wonder what that soul is that's wearing that costume, that, right, you know, that particular flesh suit, you know? Right. So.
Well, and it changes your perspective, but it also changes how you deal with people once you understand that, right? Yes, because absolutely. When you realize that's just a soul trying to learn.
Yes. Right. Doing their best.
Yeah, doing their best.
Doing their best with what
having
they know.
The same amount of pains or more than
Yep.
you've had.
Yep.
All of those kinds of things. Then all of a sudden your perspective changed, and it's their story now.
Yep.
And you don't have to be personalize it.
No.
Any longer. You can just love them for their story.
That sounds easy, but it's not.
Oh, it's,
you know
really
what I
hard.
mean? Like, it's simple. The way you explained it, it is so simple, and I get frustrated because I'm like, why can't we just do this? But for some reason, it's complicated and difficult to do. But when we can, like, I'm not perfect at it. I'm not even close to perfect. Like, when I don't get too busy and too tired, then and I'm in. That's why it's so important to take care of ourselves. Then I can consciously do that. But when I'm tired, I go to the default of labeling people because it makes things easier in the moment. You know, to put everything in a neat little box and just label everything, and then I miss out on what's underneath all of that. So.
Right. Well, and you know, it's easy to be hard on yourself about that, but if you realize you've been taught that since the day you were born,
yeah, to
be that way, and you're having to overcome, even though it is a lie, it's a hard belief to overcome.
It is.
And
I think it's because of how our brains are wired, you know? Like, it's a deep neural pathway.
Absolutely.
That's the fastest way. Like, and so you have to do the work to undo old beliefs that aren't serving you, like you said, and they aren't serving humanity. you know?
Yeah, you have to put the daily practice together and practice every day. It's really no different than an athlete who goes on the field every day to perform whatever they're doing, basketball, football, whatever it happens to be, right?
Yeah.
If the minute they stop practicing,
Yep.
they immediately start to degrade.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's a
and-
bummer. It's a bummer
Yeah.
that we think that I can get in really good shape and then I never have to go to the gym again. You know, it's a bummer that you can work really, real hard and get somewhere really great, and then you can just decline as soon as you stop doing it. But that's just how it is.
It
you
really
know?
is.
Yeah.
And it's that way with everything.
Yep.
And it's that way with understanding what you're talking about and really living your higher self as opposed to your physical self, if you
Yeah.
will. It takes daily practice. And even with daily practice, you're going to have a bad game.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I write books and things like that, and I wrote a book in 2016 that I still haven't published because as soon as I wrote it, I was confronted with what I wrote the book about, and I still haven't been able to overcome it. And it was just being able to sit with people that you're in conflict with, and I think. I don't know. There are still places where I wish I could be better or be stronger or whatever. But I was thinking about that on the way here. Just like I have some real weaknesses. I don't like to get my heart broken, and so I stay away from situations where I think potentially someone could hurt my heart. And I wish I was stronger where I could just show up and not,
Where
and
you
I'm
could
trying to
be
get
more
there.
vulnerable and you'd be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, be safe in being vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah. Have a level of safety that, whatever comes. So that's something that I'm trying to work through right now. And I think, how boring would it be if we nailed everything halfway through our life and we didn't have anything left to learn,
Well, yeah, our soul would be going, I don't need that experience, right? We'd
yeah.
have moved on to the next grand adventure by then.
Yes, exactly. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I have new challenges. In fact, the older I get, I've heard this over and over again since I was small. The older you get, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know all that much. For me, it's exciting because I love to learn, and what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to learn from other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the soul work that you do. What does it look like, your practice when you bring people in? And
Well, like I said, that there's such an extensive process of creating emotional safety so that people will be vulnerable. So I already talked about that. But then something that is a gift that I realized was a gift that I've been given since I was small was being able to condense human feelings and experiences into words. And so I have a process that's called cut and paste journaling. And so when somebody comes into my classes, I'll give them a stack of like 20 sheets of phrases of feeling things like something like that made me feel small, or I wish I could remember, who I was when I was younger, or whatever. Just all sorts of thoughts that I know that humans think. And so I just ask people to sit down and just start cutting out everything that resonates. And immediately I'll turn on music and they'll just start to cry because they're just like, how did you know this is exactly how I feel? I didn't even know this is how I feel. And there's something very cathartic, not only about them being able to put words to how they feel, but looking around the room and seeing that so many other people are using the exact same sheets of phrases, and they are also feeling understood. And so then all of a sudden you're like, I'm not alone in this weird, chaotic experience I'm having inside. And so then you can start to talk about it. So then I love what happens individually with my students, but I love even more what happens as a group because we've all agreed to not talk about label things. I'll see Republicans and Democrats having beautiful conversations, not even knowing that, like, this is somebody I thought was my enemy, but I didn't. I'm falling deeply in love with them before I know that, and then it's too late. By the time I found out, they're already in love with each other. So everybody will sit down and cut out their experience, just like if you were able to sit down and write, but it's there for them, and then they start to paste their story together, and then we have all sorts of imagery and colors and paint and just beautiful images, and then they'll put that with it. And so then by the time you're done, and many times this is like several days, at the end of the time we sit around in a circle and we're able to read our story and tell it to each other. And that's just the most empowering, beautiful experience to do that by yourself,
Sure.
but also to be in a circle and hear everybody else do that. And like I said, by the time you're done and then the rules are lifted and you realize that you've just been a roommate with somebody you never thought you could ever agree with, but but suddenly you're like planning vacations together because you've just spent 5 days together. It changes you.
Well,
it
you found out
you.
who each other really
Yes,
was.
exactly.
Right.
And
Instead
then
of
you go home and you're like, I wonder if my next door neighbor who has that political sign in front of their yard, and so I always ignore them, I wonder if they're like that person. I wonder if I took a chance to talk to them on a soul level, if maybe we really do love and care about each other, you know. And I've witnessed this with thousands of people. I have, you know, I get, because of social media and Facebook and everything, I get to see who remains friends that have been at my retreats over the last 15 years. And they stay friends. When you have a bonding experience like that, you stay close in each other's lives forever, because sometimes they have a more intimate experience than they have with their best friends at home, you know, because they're able to let their guard down and talk about what they struggle with and what their fears are and what their traumas have been and what their real dreams are. That I went to school and I got a PhD, but what I really want to do is, you know, be a farmer, you know, like being able to say that out loud and then have people go, why don't you go do it then? You know, and where they couldn't go home and say that, you know, it's just the most exquisite experience that I want everybody to do it. And that's why I started certifying instructors. So now I have all these instructors that are doing it. And my dream is just like, there's all these groups of people in backyards and living rooms and libraries just getting together and talking without labels and loving each other and loving themselves.
So you talk about when they come into this experience, they come in with a clean slate.
Yep.
In other words, you don't use any information about them. None of the other students know that either then.
No, you can't. You don't say stuff like, what do you do for a living? Right. That's you know, those questions when you first you know, you go to a party or a mixer and a networking event, all those questions you ask each other. So then what do you talk about? You know, you have to dig deeper and find things that to talk about besides that. And so all those surface level conversations that keep you on the surface, they're not even accessible because of the agreements that you've made. So you go deep immediately, and it's just, whoa, like, why aren't we doing this as a human family?
Right.
You know?
I ask weird questions at parties anyway. So
I do too.
I
love weird questions.
Good, I'll ask you some.
Okay, good.
I mean, some other weird questions.
Okay, awesome.
So you're giving these people this experience, and it comes together. How many, like 3-day type of event?
It's typically 4 or 5 days.
4 or 5 days?
Yeah. Long enough to... It's almost like you have to detox off of the world's ways.
You do.
You know?
Well, you do. Because, and you know they're going to go back to their same... That's why putting daily practice into place to go home with is so important.
Yep.
We haven't got to that part of what you do yet, but I already know that's part of what you do.
Yeah,
so.
definitely.
Because they are going to go home and back to their work and back to their life.
And they've changed, but their life
life
hasn't changed.
Right.
The people in their life haven't changed. They've changed. Yeah.
And like any addict, it's easy to go back to those things if you go back to the same crowd, if you will, right?
Yep.
So what are you doing to help people with that?
Well, at the end of the events, at least for half a day, sometimes for a whole day, we talk about that. We talk because people will start, as soon as they start going, I'm going home tomorrow, I'm going home in, a day and a half, they start getting freaked out. They're like, okay, this works, but I have to go home to a really toxic whatever, a job, maybe a relationship with a child, maybe a relationship with a partner. And so we immediately just start talking about boundaries, about how you can love people. A lot of us have to love people that we live with in the same house that we have conflict with. And so we talk about separating who you are. So what we call it is we call it you are your soul house. And you have to decide how close people get to your soul house. So maybe some people get to be on the porch. That's a tremendous honor for anybody to even know where your soul house is. Some people you need to meet at the coffee shop. That's still pretty close, or out by the fence. Some people you meet in another state. Some people you meet in other countries. And then we call the people that you have difficult conflict that constantly are triggering you, we call those moon people. And what you do is you put them figuratively, spiritually on the moon in your mind. And it's nothing about, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with them. It might be you. It might be you're in a weak place where you just can't, you don't have the capacity or whatever to deal with this right now. So all of these boundaries are dynamic. They can change as you heal, as they heal. But then we just talk about how this is a situation that keeps happening, and I always get my feelings hurt. Okay, so now I'm going to go into this situation next time, and it's probably still going to happen when I get home. But I'm going to just I'm gonna hear it from the moon. It's gonna be like wah wah wah, like the Charlie Brown voices, and I'm just gonna love them. I'm not gonna need them to change for me to be okay.
Right.
I'm gonna let them be on their journey, but I'm going to start saying things like, when you do this, I feel like this, so now I'm gonna do this. When if you yell at me or you keep lying to me or you do this, I'm working really hard to heal, and so I'm gonna remove myself. For myself. You don't say you're a terrible person or whatever. You just say, this is what I'm going to do, because this isn't really working for me. And then, just giving everyone tools to stay, my biggest course is called Soul Restoration, to stay restored. But after they do all of that deep work, it's like 10 hours a day, they don't want to go back. They've had such an incredible experience that they're motivated to even do really hard things, like say, I can't be in this conversation anymore, so I'm going to remove myself. Or even, if it's a child or whatever, just not letting it into your soul house, not letting the energy or the words of that into your soul house, letting people be who they are, but you don't let it in, Again, it's one of those things that sounds simple, but it's not easy, It takes discipline. You have to just keep remembering the way people label me or the way people perceive me is usually because of their own pain. It doesn't have anything to do with me, and being able to separate that and still love them. If we're not anytime you add love to something, it softens it. So I always tell people, like, anger is not bad. If you add love to anger, it's very productive. I think there's things like shame that are absolutely unproductive, but anything you add love to, even if it's just in your heart, like, I love that person and I wish them the best, and I don't want to be anywhere near them. I hope they have a great life, really far away from me.
It's even okay to say I'm angry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those things, right?
Of
because
course.
anger is something that
friend.
happens to you,
yes.
right? I feel angry. I feel bitter. I feel upset with this
Yes.
person for this reason.
Yep.
But it's there. I always find it's helpful for me to say, that's, I don't say it out loud usually to them because it can be condescending. But in my head, I say that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
Because it is a story.
Yeah.
It's their story.
Yes,
right?
it is.
And I can love them for their story.
Yep.
I don't have to participate in their story.
No.
So that helps me to kind of walk through that process you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is to, in my head, say that and realize that, well, I don't have to become part of their story.
No, and I think it's important to inspect it and see if you do have a part in it, and to make repairs if you do.
Right.
But if you don't, just know that this is a process that they're going through, that they need to go through, and not like I struggle still. I was going to say I used to be a really codependent people pleaser. I still tend to go to that place. So I'm not going to say I'm recovered from it. I'm trying to be more aware of how I try to repair things by taking responsibility and either not taking accountability or taking like I do these things just to not have I hate conflict.
Right.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
But it's a part of this experience, especially where we're at this time in history. There's just this air of conflict. It's chaos, like you said. But every good and beautiful thing, like where we live right now, St. George, Utah, imagine what happened here millions of years ago to create this
Right.
absolutely spectacular geology, absolute chaos, earthquakes and volcanoes, and
Well, it was all underwater.
yeah, like that's what I think about a lot. I think like to create the kind of massive change that we need to experience as a human family to break us back together, it's going to get messy. It's messy right now.
It is messy.
And I think about just even the process of making art. Like I make the most enormous mess because I love to use a lot of different supplies. And I just think that's part of the process, this messy, messy process of creating something new. Instead of us going, this is awful and terrible and we need things to go back to how they used to be, we need to just go, sometimes you got to blow everything up and put it back together a different way, or just sweep up the pieces and start completely over. Use it as
Right.
compost
And be
fertilizer.
okay with that.
Be okay with it.
Yeah, and don't hold on.
And also take an active role in creating what you want to happen next, instead of saying, I hope they fix this. I hope they, like we are they. Whatever you want to create, you better start creating it in your own home and in your own relationships if you want the world to be that way.
Absolutely. And you have to create it within yourself.
Yep.
You're only
Yeah,
gonna,
start within
everything
yourself.
else around you will become you as you do that.
Yes,
right?
I have definitely experienced that. Yes.
That will happen. So we only have a couple minutes left. It goes so fast.
It does go so fast.
I know. Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and find you.
I have a website that's melodyrossmedia.com. I have a lot of books on Amazon. You can just, search Melody Ross books. And then my academy is called Soul Road Academy, and I have a lot of soul work courses. That's where my information for my certification to become an art healer is. And
you have that on Facebook, right?
Yeah, I have an academy that's soulroadacademy.com, and I also have, you can find me on Facebook. Just Melody Freebird Ross is the Facebook account that I use the most. I have a free Facebook group that has a lot of these free activities called Creative Soul Searching with Melody Ross. I think there's several thousand people in there that just are it's such a wonderful community because we keep the red carpet rules. We keep those rules. We don't talk about divisive things. We just talk about soul work, and we share our projects and our lives and things like that. So everyone's invited to join that as long as you can keep those rules.
Awesome. And what's that page called?
It's called Creative Soul Searching with Melody Ross.
Yeah. I think that'd be awesome to join. You might find me in there.
Good. We would love to have you.
Just going to let you know.
It's great people in there.
And I'm going to quote you. I wrote this down at the bottom of my sheet. I'm going to go to the bottom of my sheet, but it just hit me. I think this is awesome. You say soul work is the most important work you'll ever do because you are truly the only one.
Yep. Yep. It's the truth.
And I love that. So
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me pull that off and share.
Thanks for finding it and reading it.
I did do some research.
Yeah, thank you.
Today. So everybody, definitely look up your books and look you up online. She has an amazing energy. She's sitting across from me. I've met her a few times in the past, and every time I've met her, she has a great energy. So definitely find her there.
I also have a memoir called,
we're going to turn that down.
50 Roads to the Middle of My Life. It's a book I just published last year that'll tell about my whole journey to here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Love and peace,
This has
everyone.
been Spiritual Revolution Radio with Dr. Will Miller. For more information or to be a guest, please visit lifebydesign.institute. Join us next week for another edition of Spiritual Revolution Radio with your host, Dr. Will Miller.